As I mentioned in my last video, the Chinese companies that are building consumer tech like gaming mice are growing by leaps and bounds over like the past 5 years or so. Keyboards are no exception to that, and so when a friend and a viewer reached out and asked if I'd take a look at the Ajazz AK820, I figured why the heck not. And look, I wasn't expecting much out of this thing, but man does this thing rock. So the AK820 is a 75% gasket-mounted mechanical keyboard that comes in under $50 and feels way better than it has any right to. But that wasn't my first impression. When I opened the box, I'll admit I was a little worried. I've used budget keyboards before. In fact, I did a whole video on a fake mechanical keyboard that they sell at like the dollar store. So I know what junk feels like. But this Ajazz keyboard isn't junk. When I picked it up, I noticed immediately how much lighter it was than keyboards that I'm used to, but that shouldn't be that surprising. It's an all-plastic build after all. It's a little flimsy, maybe not as sturdy as some of the all-metal keyboards you'll find out there, but once I put it down on the desk and started typing on it, any reservation I had went right out the window. It sounded really, really good. Nice and thick with like a marbly, creamy sound that had a real satisfying pop at the bottom out. I was impressed. I want to make it clear from the jump that I think this keyboard is pretty great for 40 bucks. The AK820 does have a gasket mounted design that allows for some of those more muted sound profiles, and this thing is stuffed to the gills with sound dampening foam. While a majority of the build is ABS plastic, thankfully we get a polycarbonate plate combined with a silicone bottom pad. It's even got just fluffy cotton in there, a separate PET pad, and a pour-on PCB piece of foam. It's got more sound dampening material that I've ever seen in like a production keyboard. And while that might not be your particular style, it sounded pretty great. Not everyone loves the sound you get from just stuffing a bunch of foam and silicone into a case and calling it a day. And I get that, but I gotta assume for like 40 bucks, this is gonna be a lot of people's first mechanical keyboard. And that doesn't go unnoticed by me. The version I got came with their sea salt switches, but both versions are a linear switch. Ajazz gets some of their switches made by a company called Grain Gold, a name I hadn't heard of before. So I reached out to a few friends who have a switch obsession, to put it lightly. And they told me that they've been around for a few years, and while they don't have the pedigree that a brand like Gateron or Kale does, there are no slouches, and the switches do feel pretty good. As for choosing between the sea salt or the moon switches, the only difference is in the spring. The sea salt switches have an initial activation force of 37 grams, which makes them crazy light, and the moon switch's activation force is only about 40 grams, so there's not much of a difference there. I've used speed silvers before, and I wasn't a big fan, but with the sea salt switch, they felt super nice and light, super crispy. I don't know if I'm just more attuned to mechanical keyboards now. For the record, those speed silvers I tried were a part of the very first mechanical keyboard I ever bought and quickly returned. But these feel pretty nice. But be warned, they're light. They're way more tuned for something like gaming over typing, but they feel pretty good in both applications. The board comes shockingly with double shot PBT keycaps that feel pretty good. If maybe not as high quality as something you'd find in like a standalone keycap set that costs like just as much as this entire keyboard. But yeah, double shot keycaps, which tells me Ajazz isn't cheaping out here. It feels like not that long ago, getting double shot keycaps was something you could only hope for out of like high-end keyboards. Although part of me does wish in this case, maybe not printed keycaps, but we had shine-through keycaps because the AK820 comes with full-blown RGB backlighting. RGB isn't as common in higher-end enthusiast boards anymore, but it's still pretty alive and well in gaming-focused boards, so it feels right at home here. Normally, I'd suggest taking something like RGB out to help save on cost, But since this thing is only 40 bucks, it's a nice addition to have here. There isn't anything super specific like see-through side panels, so when you turn it off, you'd never know it was there. So if you don't like it, you can turn it off. The keycaps on mine were this white-purple theme, but I've seen a lime green colorway as well as a black and gray version if you want something a bit more neutral. This color really does have a nice lavenderish and a blue color that meshes really well with the white. I really like it. The AK820 is a multi-platform keyboard with support for both Windows and Mac OS, which is good since I'm a hybrid user. There is software you can use to help dial in your configuration, but there are a lot of hotkeys built right into the board, which includes switching operating systems, and that's nice to see. A simple function key press is all I need to swap over. It's nice to see setup functions baked right into the board, similar to the way Ducky does things. The staplers aren't high-end screw-ins, they're plate-mounted, but again, I wouldn't expect them not to be for 40 bucks. They don't sound terrible though. Normally, I'm always lubing and tuning stabs to my liking, but these felt really great out of the box. Seriously, for a $40 board, that's awesome. When writing this review, I was struggling to come up with an accurate way to describe it. It's not a high-end board, but it doesn't feel bad either. And when I took down some of my old Razer mechanical keyboards to compare it, that's when it hit me. It's like if Razer or Logitech or one of those gaming-focused companies made something like a gasket-mounted keyboard back in 2013, and they actually put effort into making it a good keyboard. No, this isn't a super high-end keyboard, but it's perfectly serviceable for $40. If you're someone who just can't be bothered to care about Razer or Logitech, but you also don't want to drop $100 plus on some enthusiast level build, something like the Ajazz AK820 is perfect. Companies like Razer have put out some halfway decent boards in the past, but there's no denying that there's a hefty Razer tax added to the price tag to give that added feel of being premium. Sure, this board is about as bare bones as you get. No extra features, but no extra tax. And I'm sure that appeals to a lot of people. Not everyone is interested in an enthusiast level custom keyboard where you pick your own switches and your keycaps and everything else. But the stuff offered up by some of the more mainstream gamer-focused brands have inflated price tags that makes some enthusiast level builds seem like a steal. I mentioned earlier that this might be someone's first mechanical keyboard. Maybe they scraped together money for a sick PC setup, but they don't have much left over for peripherals. I have a very vivid memory of browsing old desktop battle station threads on places like NeoWin or Shack News or the Hard forums, and I would be super jealous of the setups I'd see there. And I'd walk up to my local Best Buy and try to find a keyboard or a mouse that would make my setup look that much cooler. And with the money I had at the time, there wasn't a lot out there for me. If that kid could see this keyboard for $40 on the shelf, he would have been bouncing off the wall. The only real downside I see is there's literally no kind of gaming focus features. These days, higher polling rates and Hall effect switches seem to be the go-to for gaming keyboards. Ajazz does have a Hall effect category on their website, but as of right now, it's totally blank. But if you just want a simple, great-looking, and great-sounding keyboard, I don't really see a reason why you shouldn't pick up the AK820 or any of the other offerings from Ajazz. Speaking of which, they have some really interesting stuff on their website. They've got like a half keyboard to help free up some space for gaming. They've also got a keyboard with some incredibly familiar color schemes. They also have what I'm assuming is an OEM Stream Deck that might be interesting to check out. They also have gaming mice that seem to come in some of my personal favorite shapes. Normally I disregard these kind of mice, but given the quality of this keyboard, it makes me wonder if these mice are just as good as the competition. But let me know in the comments, do you want me to take a look at Ajazz's Stream Deck, or what about their half keyboard, or their $40 Razer Viper clone that looks like a steal? Hit me up in the comments and let me know which one you want me to take a look at, and I will catch y'all in the next one.